A very warm welcome, everybody, to this session on Western political thought. In this session, we will very specifically focus on T.H. Green's contribution to the understanding of state. Now, this requires, first of all, a little bit of explanation. T.H. Green, all of you perhaps know, was a very famous British political theorist, a very well-known British political thinker who belonged to the 19th century. The period is from 1836 to 1882. Now, T.H. Green, he was a kind of philosopher, he was a kind of, say, political theorist who made a very unique contribution to the understanding of state in the sense that he was a liberal thinker, but his understanding of state apparently, looks like something which has very little resemblance with, say, the liberal spirit. That is, one can put it like this, that T.H. Green's understanding of state, it was unique in the sense that it is a liberal understanding, but it is not reflective of the typical liberal spirit. And it is precisely in the light of this proposition that I will try to explain before you what exactly was T.H. Green's unique contribution to the state was all about. To have a proper understanding of Green's understanding of state, we have to, first of all, keep in mind two very standard perspectives which were quite dominant in T.H. Green's time in 19th century England. One understanding or one perspective was associated with the typical Lockean understanding. And in fact, the Lockean understanding was a very popular understanding, and it was very strongly believed that the Lockean understanding of state, that was reflective of the authentic spirit of liberal values of British liberal spirit. Now, what was the Lockean understanding? The Lockean understanding actually embodied the spirit of laissez-faire. That means a minimalist understanding of state. What is meant by this minimalist understanding? Minimalist understanding means it has two components. One is that the individual should be left absolutely free to pursue his activities. Second, the state's role will be minimal. Minimal in the sense that the state will intervene, the state will interfere, the state will step into the domain of the individual's life only when the individual's rights, they are taken away, they are violated, they are threatened. The state has no positive role to play in the life of the individual. The state will not poke its long nose into the private domain of the individual. That is the typical liberal spirit which focuses their attention on the individual, on the primacy of the individual, on the autonomy and freedom of the individual. This was a typical Lockean understanding. As distinct from Lockean understanding, which all of you perhaps know was grounded in the idea of natural rights. In fact, the Lockean understanding is very strongly characterized by this understanding. The understanding is this, that man is born with certain natural rights. And these natural rights are innate in the life of the individual. So this is the typical liberal spirit. As distinct from this standard, typical laissez-faire spirit of liberalism, with its focus on natural rights, with its focus on the freedom and autonomy of the individual, we come across another trend in 19th century British liberal history, that is the kind of liberalism which was associated with Jeremy Bentham. That is Bentham's utilitarian understanding. Now, Bentham's understanding of state was quite different from the Lockean understanding. Bentham also very strongly believed in, he very strongly shared the liberal values. But Bentham's understanding was this. This was a kind of understanding which was not, say, in principle opposed to the intervention of the state. Yes, the state's role in the life of the individual, state's intervention in society, yes, it is welcome, provided, however, it maximizes the happiness of the individual. But please remember here, and if you look at the argument very carefully, you will find that the consideration is the individual. The starting point is the individual. In Locke, the starting point is the rights of the individual. In the case of Bentham, the starting point is the happiness of the individual. That is, if state intervention maximizes my pleasure, maximizes my happiness, well, it is welcome. If it does not, if it leads to my suffering, then it is not welcome. But the starting point, and that is the common point of similarity, that is between Locke, the Lockean understanding, and Benthamite understanding. The starting point is the individual. In Locke's case, it is rights. In Bentham's case, it is utility, maximization of pleasure or maximization of my happiness. Now, T.H. Green actually attempted a kind of understanding which contested the Lockean understanding, which contested the Benthamite understanding. T.H. Green did not believe in, and he did not thereby share, the Lockean understanding, that is, man is born with certain natural rights. That is, rights as if constitute a domain which is independent of society, which is independent of the social collective. This is the starting point of T.H. Green. And he also contests Benthamite understanding that, after all, the individual will have to, or the individual's attitude towards the state will be guided simply by utilitarian considerations. That is, whether the activity of the state it contributes to enrichment or maximization of my pleasure or happiness, that is the only guiding principle. That was also not acceptable to T.H. Green. You perhaps are already familiar with the understanding of T.H. Green that, after all, the core of T.H. Green was constituted by certain metaphysical and moral principles. And the essence of T.H. Green's understanding was this, that is, whether as an individual I will consider a particular action of the state, a particular policy of the state as beneficial, as acceptable, as endorsable, well, the main consideration, the primary consideration is neither rights, natural rights, nor utility. Rather, it is a moral consideration. This is a typical Aristotelian understanding, and therein we come across the idealist orientation of T.H. Green. And now this is something which was absolutely unknown in British political philosophy. This is a kind of understanding which was somewhat alien to British political philosophical understanding. Now, why? We have already seen that the way liberalism flourished in Britain, primarily through Locke and secondarily through Bentham, well, in that type of understanding, whether it is Benthamite understanding or Lockean understanding, this idea of say, looking at state in terms of a kind of collective, that is, there is no conflict between the individual and the state, that the individual and the state, they can be synthesized, that they can be harmonized. Well, this is a kind of understanding which was somewhat unknown to British political philosophy. Therein lies the importance of the contribution of T.H. Green. Now, let us see how T.H. Green endorsed, how T.H. Green he justified, he vindicated this understanding of state. What exactly was his understanding of state? Basically, T.H. Green's understanding of state was marked by two very important characteristics. As I have already explained, that he was a liberal. He was quite uncompromising as a liberal. But he tried to synthesize his focus on liberalism, his focus on the ingredients of liberalism, that means, say, freedom of the individual, the rights of the individual, with something which, however, was absent in the typical British understanding of say, liberal values, of liberal understanding. Now, what was that? That is the state. That is a minimalist understanding of state which characterized typical British liberal spirit. This is something which was contested, which was questioned by T.H. Green. T.H. Green believed that after all, there is no conflict between the freedom of the individual and the intervention of the state. Why? Because T.H. Green's understanding was based on a central formulation, and this at once dismisses the typical liberal understanding of rights. T.H. Green's understanding is like this. As an individual, of course, you have rights, but you enjoy rights, or your enjoyment of rights is meaningful only in relation to society. That is, you cannot claim that you have an absolutely autonomous domain where you exercise in your rights in such a way that it has no implication for society. Yes, you are entitled to exercise your rights, you are entitled to enjoy your rights, but not at the cost of the social collective. That is, while you are enjoying your rights, you cannot sacrifice, you cannot forget, you cannot ignore the notion of common good. So your enjoyment of rights, your enjoyment of freedom is not independent of the totality of the social collective. Now the point is that who will be the adjudicator? Who will balance your right with another individual's rights? Who will actually intervene if your right clashes with the rights of another individual? Who will actually step into this kind of situation, or into a kind of situation where my exercise of right leads to, say, the abjurement of another person's rights? That is, my exercise of right, if it leads to the curtailment of rights of another individual, then who will step into this situation and will somehow settle the problem? Therein comes, or therein we come across, according to T.H. Green, the importance of the state. It is a state which will have to intervene and thereby act as an adjudicator. In other words, the state is necessary, the intervention of the state is necessary, the proactive role of the state is required for the overall interest of the individuals living in society. It is not the individual, but it is the individuals, the plurality of individuals, the plurality of interests of all individuals living in society. And for the defense of the plurality of interests of all individuals, you require the state. Therefore, T.H. Green's understanding of state, T.H. Green's defense of state intervention, it is actually a kind of defense which does not violate, which does not question, which does not contest the importance of the individual. On the contrary, it is argued that for the defense of, for the justification, for betterment, and for a better play of rights of all individuals, so that there is no clash, there is no conflict, for the sake of harmony in society, for the sake of balancing the right of one individual and the right of another individual, if you have to establish a kind of balance, then you require an adjudicator, you require an umpire, and that is, the umpire is the state. So this is one very central formulation of T.H. Green. Therefore, rights of the individual and intervention of the state, freedom of the individual and the proactive role of the state, they are not contrary to each other. One, in fact, supplements the other. Now, this is you can understand, this is a totally new kind of understanding which was unknown in 19th century British political thought, and you can also perhaps guess, you can perhaps anticipate that this is a kind of understanding which later contributed in a very big way to the development of welfareism, to the development of welfare state. Because throughout the 20th century, in fact, through a long period of 20th century, throughout a long phase of 20th century, we came across many such experiments. We came across many such programs undertaken, launched by a number of countries, not only in England, not only in Sweden, not only in, say, a number of other European countries like France and Germany, but also in India. That is, you cannot consider the state as a suspect. The state's intervention is necessary for the overall collective interests of all individuals in society. That is, if there is a kind of situation where my exercise of right, say the exercise of right by some rich people, by some affluent people, that leads to poverty, that leads to suffering of the rest of society, then of course the state will have to intervene. And therefore, T.H. Green's understanding, it settles a problem, that is, there is no necessary conflict between rights and freedoms of the individual and the intervention of the state. Now I come to the a very crucial question. That is, if you acknowledge the fact that there is no conflict between rights and freedoms of the individual and the intervention of the state, then what about the right to disobey the state? That is, does T.H. Green acknowledge the right to resist the state? That is, right to resistance. What is T.H. Green's understanding of this very important right? And with this, with the elaboration of this point, I will conclude this lecture. This is a very, very important and very interesting component of T.H. Green's understanding of state. Now, why I am raising this question? Because all of you know, especially in the 21st century, all of you know that we are coming across almost, it is our everyday experience. That is, there are protest movements. There is resistance against authority. There is resistance against tyranny. There is resistance against oppression. And these rights, well, they, in different societies, in different parts of the world, these rights are claimed by the oppressed people, that we have the right to resist. And this right to resist, well, this is our normal, natural right. If there is oppression, we will resist. So, what was T.H. Green's understanding of the right to resist the state? This understanding, or T.H. Green's stand, or T.H. Green's standpoint vis-a-vis this question, is twofold. From two different angles, one can look upon this question, and one can perhaps arrive at a very, say, unconventional kind of formulation regarding T.H. Green. First of all, T.H. Green in principle is opposed to the idea of resistance. T.H. Green, please remember, as I have already told you, he was essentially a liberal. He believed in liberal values. He believed in as a liberal, he believed in the liberal structure of society. He believed in the liberal constitution of Britain. And since in England, remember, T.H. Green was writing in 19th century. In England, the Glorious Revolution had taken place already. That is, as all of you know, it is known as the Bloodless Revolution in 1688. So, for more than 2 centuries, Britain had not witnessed any bloodbath. Britain had more or less been a witness of a stable order. Yes, there were conflicts, there were tensions, there was social unrest, but somehow these problems were taken care of by the British liberal society and the British liberal state. So T.H. Green actually had immense faith in the liberal structure, liberal values, in the potentiality of the Constitution of England. That is, the British Constitution, he believed, had enough resilience, had enough potentiality, had enough possibility, had enough opportunities to contain this issue of unrest. So he believed that in principle there was no necessity of acknowledging the right to resist, the right to protest. Because after all, it is something unconstitutional. Because the Constitution does not give you the right to resist. Legally, you are not entitled to enjoy the right to resist the state, the right to overthrow the constitution of the state. And therefore, T.H. Green, on this level, well, he was in principle opposed to the right to resist, the right to protest. We have to remember one thing. T.H. Green, in principle, always argued that you try to explore all possible opportunities whereby you can contain the problem of dissatisfaction, the problem of unrest. And he very strongly believed that after all, the Constitution had the avenues, the Constitution provided the opportunities, the Constitution provided the possibilities by using which, by exploring which, it will be possible to settle the problems in a peaceful manner without going for, say, without going for a bloodbath. T.H. Green, after all, was rather disturbed by what was happening in the neighboring countries. The French Revolution had taken place in 1789. And Europe, many other European countries, well, they were marked by, say, the kind of unrest which had already taken place in France. So T.H. Green was not at all enthused by the kind of thing that took place in France. And T.H. Green never considered that the French Revolution to be a kind of model which should be followed in England also. Now, does it mean that T.H. Green was a conservative like Edmund Burke? The point is no, he was not a conservative. But at the same time, we must also remember one thing, which to a large extent perhaps explains T.H. Green's, say, very strong inclination towards the defense of, say, the liberal structure, the liberal constitution, the liberal values, his adherence to the liberal spirit. Now, what is that? After all, please remember, he was a devout Christian. And as a devout Christian, he was a believer in God. He believed that, after all, it is God's will that peace will prevail, that violence will not be there, bloodbath will not be there. So, as a believer in God, as a believer, as a religious person, along with the fact that he subscribed to very strong traditional liberal values, and along with this, if you take into consideration the historical factor that after all for 200 years Britain was a kind of society, Britain lived through a kind of, say, political order which was free from major disturbance, the kind of disturbance that had rocked France in 1789. So, in England, after all, there was no historical possibility of a revolutionary upheaval, revolutionary upswing. And so, that explains that why T.H. Green was not at all enthusiastic about any right to say protest against the state, right to launch a revolutionary armed violent struggle against the state. On another level, T.H. Green, however, believed that only in an exceptional situation, if the state turns tyrannical, if the authority violates openly the structure of the Constitution, the values of the Constitution, that is, if the blatantly, nakedly, the state, the authority, well, it goes against the spirit of the Constitution, spirit of the, say, the rules of the game, then of course in an exceptional situation, yes, the people may have to think in terms of launching a struggle against the state. That is the right to resist that T.H. Green does not ultimately dismiss it in absolute terms, but only in an exceptional situation where the ruling authority itself violates the rules of the game, and thereby it creates a situation where it becomes impossible for the society to accept or endorse the policies of the state. Only in such a situation, the right to resist, well, that can be accepted, but that is only in an exceptional situation, not in a normal situation. With that, I close this discussion. Thank you.